Hello, swing dancers. It's Julien from Blablaswing, and today in Herrang, I am with Adam Lee. So, Adam Lee, can you introduce you, please?
Yeah, sure. My name is Adam Lee. I am currently a PhD student in jazz studies at the University of Pittsburgh. Previous to that, I have my master's degree in music education from New York University and a history degree from the University of California at Santa Cruz. And I've been a musician for 33 years now and a swing dancer for 23 years.
Wow.
And I'm a saxophone player. I led a big band, excuse me. I led a big band in the Los Angeles area called the LA Swing Barrons. And right now I lead a 9-piece band in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, called the Pit Vipers.
That's a huge background you have there. Wow. Can we go back from the start and how you fall in love with jazz music? How it happened?
Yeah, of course. I was 7 years old and I started playing the clarinet. And my grandmother, who was a concert violinist, she went to the record store to buy a record for me to inspire me to play the clarinet. And she didn't know anything about clarinetists, so she just picked a record with a clarinetist on the cover. I can still picture the record cover in my head. There's a blue record with a blue border, and there was a man playing clarinet in profile, and that guy was Benny Goodman.
Right.
So my grandmother unknowingly bought me my first record. It was a swing record. It was Benny Goodman, and I played that record till the grooves wore out. I would sit there in my room and I would listen to it on my record player, and then when it reached the end, I would pick up the needle and start it again. And then when I had played that first side, the A side, about a dozen times, I would flip it over and play the B side a dozen times. And I just really it was the first music that was mine. Like before that, I listened to music too, but it was my parents' music. It was my dad's music. I grew up on classical and classic rock music, but then jazz was like mine. When I was 9, I started playing the saxophone, and it was shortly after that I discovered the Count Basie Orchestra. And then that was like, okay, I'm good. I'll be here for the rest of my life, listening to Count Basie.
Wow, you have the your relation with jazz is so soon. It's impressive because it's not so usual to fall in love with jazz before to be 10 or before to be adolescent.
Yeah,
Teenager.
I think it's one of those things. I just got it in my ear, and I didn't know any better. I didn't know what I was supposed to be listening to as a young child. I had this record that I loved. And
Was it complicated when you grow up and be a teenager and maybe some of your friends listen some Slipknot music or 50 Cent music, I don't know, and you still listening swing music with Count Basie and other things? Was it difficult? Or?
It wasn't so bad. I mean, I also listened to. I'm a little older than the Slipknot and the 50 Cent generation, but I grew up listening to Pearl Jam and Nirvana and U2 and the Red Hot Chili Peppers and stuff. So I did listen to other music too, but then I would listen to jazz also, and so it wasn't hard. Plus, I was a band geek, so all of my peers were also into kind of weird music, weird for people of our age category, because we were listening to band music, Aaron Copland, Benjamin Britten, things like that. So, we were all weird to begin with musically. So my being weird about jazz wasn't any more weird than any of the other stuff.
Yeah, right. Can I have the chance, like other people in the camp, to go to your lecture, and we learn so much about everything, and you have give us a lot of anecdotes. I don't know. Can I ask you to maybe cut your phone? Just is it yours? Maybe. Yeah.
Right.
In my ears, I can hear.
I think that's the
It's
machine in the
yeah,
room.
maybe yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had the chance to listen your lectures in Herrang with full of stories about musicians and like songs we don't know, like why jumping at the woodside is calling jumping at the woodside. It's really precious. And where did you find all this information?
Mostly my scholarship takes me through autobiographies. I read every autobiography of a jazz musician from the swing era and more. But my favorite way to get information about musicians' lives is autobiographical. And I recognize that autobiographies are a little bit dangerous when we look at what is true. But true is, a very flexible word. So to me, I think that what is true for the musicians is the story they tell. Maybe it's not actually true. Maybe the dates are wrong. Maybe the circumstances. Maybe they weren't riding in a Buick. They were riding in a Chevrolet. It doesn't matter, right? Those things aren't really what's important. The important thing is the stories they tell, the memories they choose to share, the things that they thought were important enough to write down in their memoirs. I think that's really an important part of the tale. And then also looking through like newspaper articles, things like that. I try and, use as much source material from the time or from the participants and less so much from like secondary sources or like post facto scholars. I've still read like all the Gunther Schuller and the Stanley Dance and stuff like that, but I like to stick with autobiographical content as much as I possibly can. So most of the little anecdotes and things that I've picked up over the years that I think are amusing come from the words of the musicians themselves.
Yeah, and maybe for the swing dancers, it's maybe a part of the big war of swing that we escape. We put apart, and we maybe should to take a look more. We learn about dancers, just have a small map of the musician, but not going deeply into this history.
Yeah,
it's a strong work to do. It's like a full-time work.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the reasons I promote and try and push and these presentations that I'm giving, like the ones I'm giving here at Herrang, is that I think that the music and the dance are inseparable. I don't believe you can understand the history of the dance without understanding the history of the music, and I don't believe you can understand the history of the music without understanding the history of the dance, which does make me a little bit unique amongst scholars of jazz, because most of the people that I interact with, even if they're knowledgeable in music terms about the swing era, they don't know anything about the dancing. They don't know about the Savoy Ballroom. They don't know about Whitey's Lindy Hoppers. They don't know Frankie Manning and Norma Miller. They don't, they're jazz scholars, maybe even of this time, but without understanding the dance, I don't think you're getting a full picture of the music, and vice versa. So I've read all the I remember reading Norma Miller's book way back in the 1990s when it came out, when I was in my undergraduate degree, and then of course I read Frankie Manning's autobiography, and I'm pretty good friends with Cynthia Millman, who helped write that, and she's given me a lot of helpful insight in terms of like how to understand scholarship of dance history as well as music history. So I don't think you can separate them. I think that if you want to understand the dance, you have to understand the music.
Thanks. I have my title for the episode. Maybe go back to the dance after your after you meet the jazz really soon. When you have the heartbeat for the swing dance, when it happened?
So yeah, that's a great question. When I was in high school, I played a school saxophone. The saxophone was owned by the school. And when I graduated, I had to return that instrument to the school. So there was a time period in which I didn't have my own saxophone to play. And I was like itching to do music. So there was this swing dance club at my university. And I was like, oh, well, I love swing. That's like what I love. So let's go and do that. And that was in 1997. I had previously learned a little bit of like some basic East Coast swing. I was dating a girl in high school, and she was on her school's dance team, and she taught me a few, step, rock step kind of things. But when I got to the university, it's like, oh, here's this club, and they had Lindy Hop on Mondays, and they had ballroom dancing of various sorts on Wednesdays. So I went to all the Lindy Hop classes, and I went to most of the ballroom classes, but really I was there for the swing dancing and there for the social dance. So we'd always have a social dance after the classes for like an hour or so. I'm not really sure. But yeah, the Lindy Hop class I remember was taught by a graduate student from Sweden named Martin. I don't remember anything else about him. If I saw him here in Herrang, I would not recognize him. But I remember he was from Sweden, and he knew the Lindy Hop, and this is 1997. I just really got into the dance because it was an opportunity to express myself musically, but also about 3 or 4 months after I started swing dancing at the university, there was this little thing called the Gap commercial.
Oh, yeah.
And my swing dance classes, I remember the classes went from being 10 or 15 students, and then literally the week after that Gap commercial came out, there was 150 students in the class. And here was me, having danced for 3 or 4 months. I was like a quote-unquote expert because I knew 5 moves instead of 0 moves.
Yeah.
And for the first time in my life, I was kind of popular.
You were the boss.
Yeah, people wanted to dance with me, and I felt like, oh, people are paying attention to me, and like my presence is desired, and it was a good feeling at the time for a nerdy band geek. And so, yeah, I had a great time in that initial scene, and I just I just loved it so much, and so even though I eventually did later in that school year save up enough money to buy my own saxophone, I stuck with the dancing even after that, and I eventually just about my second year of college, I probably wasn't totally qualified, but there wasn't really anyone else to do it. That Swedish guy I mentioned, he graduated and presumably went back to Sweden, so there was no one else teaching, so my partner and I, we kind of stepped up and we became the teachers. And
okay. And you went to big events in all the US at the time, or
at the time in the late 90s, there weren't really so much big events. That wasn't really a thing. There was an event on the West Coast called the Catalina Island event. I never went to it because it was a little too expensive and too far away for a poor college student. But I mean, there were a handful of events, but like there were workshops. Like I remember taking workshops with Frankie Manning back in 1998 and 99, I think. I remember going to Norma Miller's 80th birthday party in Oakland in '99.
And in Europe, have you been in Europe just for the dance, maybe, or?
The first time I came to Europe was a bit later. So, after I graduated from undergraduate, I moved to China. I was in Beijing from 2001 to 2009.
Yeah,
And while I was in Beijing, I started the swing dance scene in China. So I started it around 2003, but then there was this little thing called SARS, which was a respiratory illness, very contagious thing that there's this sort of panic about that. So people weren't doing anything social. But it cleared up about early 2004, and so I restarted doing swing dance events there. And then I was running swing dance events, starting to put together the first parts of a big band to play for swing dance events there. I think I eventually got that together in like 2005. The first major events that I was going to out of China were in Singapore. C-Jam with Sing Lim puts on this event, C-Jam, in Singapore. So we went there a few times. Frankie was there. And then I started coming to Herrang. I think 2005, I think, was the first year I came to Herrang.
Wow.
And then started doing occasional events, other events in Europe, but mostly Herrang, because it's...
And is there something special for you here in Herrang?
Well, at the time, it was like, if you're coming all the way from Asia to go to a swing dance event, you're not going to go to an event for just a weekend. So the fact that Herrang was 2, 3, 4, 5, however many weeks you wanted it to be, was a big draw, because the real expense coming from China was just getting here. You know, it could be $1,000 to $1,500 just for a flight. And then once you're here, yeah, I mean, certainly there were costs involved, but if you're going to spend all that money to come somewhere, the fact that we can stay here in Herrang for 4 or 5 weeks makes it much more viable. So I remember the first year I was here, I didn't really know what to expect, and I think I was only here for a week. And afterwards I was like, oh, that was a mistake. And then I started coming for many, many more weeks. And being involved in organizing things, we used to have the Friday parties, the masquerade parties. I organized a few of those, and I was a staff DJ a couple times, and just generally like trying to be involved in Herrang and kind of a mid-low level kind of thing, taking classes and
that's how you come to propose some lecture about your work.
Well, there was a time, actually, a long time, from 2011 to this year, 2019, I didn't come back to Herrang, because I left China in 2009. I started my master's degree in 2010. I came that first summer during the master's degree, but then after that it was just too busy. And then, I don't know, I think I just got involved in doing other things in the States with teaching and you know, I would go to events in the States. I would give like lectures like this. I've done some at Lindy Focus. I've done some at this event in Oakland. I'll swing it at the Savoy. Yeah, so I've definitely done lectures in various places. Done stuff in New York when they had events in New York when I was living there, and yeah. So, but this is the first time that I've done something here at Herrang that's like organized in this way.
Yeah. Okay.
But the story there was I was in Norway doing a research project. I got a grant from my university to do a research project, and I chose to do it in Norway on how the state funding systems influences the development of jazz music. But then since I knew I was going to be in Norway, which is just, just a short 1 hour plane flight from Stockholm, I reached out to Leonard and the organization of the camp and said, hey, I'm going to be in Scandinavia. Would you be interested in having me come over and do these kind of lectures on jazz history? And they said, yeah, sure. And so here I am.
Yeah, it's funny because I interviewed Leonard, and at a moment we spoke about you.
Oh.
And I feel like there is like a continuation. When I hear first Leonard and then you, it's like filiation. And it's really nice to. I feel really lucky to have the chance to listen both of you and to feed me thanks to your works both. I have just a few more questions about your tastes in music and swing dancers. Let's start from the swing dancers. Is there some of swing dancers you really appreciate and try to imitate, maybe, or is there some influences really hard?
I don't know. That's kind of hard to say. I mean, I learned swing dancing at a time. It was kind of like the swing dancing Wild West back in the late 90s. It was kind of like anything goes. But I definitely took a lot of I took a lot of influence from Frankie Manning, of course, not just as a dancer, but as a human being. He was such a great guy. So, and then, I interacted with like the Harlem Hot Shots, all those people. We brought them out to China one time when we were out there, and they did some workshops and things like that. I think they've gone back a number of times since then, but so definitely, that whole group of people has been influential on me as a dancer. But I would say, mostly that the people that influence me as a dancer are the musicians.
Let's talk about musicians.
Yeah.
So, you last night you spoke about Kansas City music when it's not the most famous sport, but really, really important in the history. I suppose your favorite bands are from Kansas City, am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. All my favorites are from Kansas City. Count Basie is my favorite by far, but Andy Kirk and his 12 Clouds of Joy, especially with the work of Mary Lou Williams, who's really one of my very favorite composers. Harlan Leonard and his Rockets, just a really underrated band, just really some hard swinging stuff. Benny Moten, the original Benny Moten Orchestra, just like really influential. And then of course I love Duke Ellington, but for different ways. Like as a musician, I love Duke, and I love Harry Carney, the baritone saxophone player for Duke Ellington. I'm a baritone saxophone player myself primarily, so like Harry Carney is like my tone model.
Yeah.
But I love all the swing music, all the big band music.
It's old bands, we can say that, compared to modern swing bands. I like to call them like that, modern swing bands. Have you heard maybe about a French band called Hot Swing Sextet from Bordeaux?
I have not.
I made a link, a connection about what you say yesterday about Count Basie and the strong rhythm section. I feel I get that in this band, the Hot Swing Sextet from Bordeaux. And is there some modern bands like Jonathan Stout or anything else you really appreciate, or you find something you like?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of great modern bands that are out there doing great stuff. Obviously I'm a little biased because I started my own band because there wasn't anybody doing specifically the Kansas City style sound that I was finding really anywhere in this modern swing music world. But yeah, I mean, Jonathan Stouts puts together a really, really nice outfit. And Josh Colazzo, who plays drums with Jonathan Stout, has a really nice band that plays kind of more of a late 40s style.
The Candy Jackets?
Yeah, the Candy Jacket Jazz Band. You know, and it's a lot of great work there, original work. Him and Albert Alva have put together some wonderful stuff. Yeah, and there's lots of other good bands out there. But for the record, one of the things I think there's a lot of bands out there that aren't getting their due recognition because the scene is kind of like boring in the sense of they just hire the same bands all the time. So to be honest, it's like a lot of times in the US I look at an event and they'll say, oh, here's this band from this place, and then I say, oh, I've seen that band 50,000 times in the last year, and it's like, oh, well, maybe this next event that's a week later, I'll see who's playing at that one. Oh, it's exactly the same band. And it's like, oh, okay, so what about this one a week after that? It's the same band. So I think that, you know, there's some room for some diversity in music, at least in the US. I can't speak on how it is in the rest of the world.
It's the same in France, for example. We have 3-4 bands who occupied all the swing events.
Yeah.
To conclude, can you give an advice for beginner musician and also beginner swing dancer? Have you an advice for them?
Well, my advice for a beginner swing musician is take a dance lesson. For myself, when I started dancing, my musicianship got way better, and even today, like, if I play a lot, my dancing gets better, and if I dance a lot, my playing gets better. So as I was saying at the beginning of the interview, they're intrinsically related. You can't separate the two. So if you want to be a swing musician, you got to know how to do at least a few steps. And as a dancer, you know, you need to start listening to the music deeply. You know, I think a lot of beginner dancers kind of fall into the trap of just like using the band as like a metronome to keep their time. But there's so much more going on in the music that can really help you dance. And you know, for maybe an intermediate level dancer, especially big band music, which, you know, goes hand in hand with swing. Certainly there were smaller swing bands from the height of the swing era, but the big bands are like the meat and potatoes of the swing genre. And there's so many levels, there's so many layers. So like, decide today you're going to hear the same song you heard 50 times, but today you're dancing to the trombones. And then maybe next week when you hear the same song played again, you know, then you're going to dance to the saxophones, and, you know, and like find different parts of the music to dance to, because the music is so rich and so complex that there's the ability to find different parts of it and use that to influence your dancing. That's what I like to do.
Thank you so much, Adam, for your time. Of course. And see you soon at your lecture.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Blablaswing.